I became an exorcist not by choice, but by calling. And it was an evolving way in which I got interested. As a young man out of university, I traveled internationally, and I saw in Eastern cultures a lot of spirit possession ceremonies, and the fact that those kind of cultures are much more open to this. I came back to America wondering, does possession and exorcism exist in America? And back then there was not much talk about this sort of thing. It was about that time that I became a Christian and felt a call to ministry. But even before I went into full-time ministry, people would then start coming to me with problems. As they told me about their problems, demons would begin to speak through their bodies. I recognized this wasn't happening to anyone else, and that there was something special that I'd been gifted with. Many people want to know, what's the most dramatic exorcism? And I really can't nail it down to one. After 15,000 documented cases of exorcism, it's hard to find just one. But I would say those in which there have been an incredible amount of complex issues. I have one particular individual that I've spent more than 50 exorcism sessions with, ranging from 2 to 4 hours each. The others that come to mind as being unusual are ones in which there's been extreme violence, in which I've been at risk. I've had my ribs broken, picked up and thrown across the room a few times. I suppose the instances of materializations, levitation, and supernatural strength stand out in my mind. The movie The Devil Inside is the closest that Hollywood has come to getting it right in terms of what a real exorcism is. And it's one of the things I like about this movie from my standpoint. There's a lot of dialogue in which they discuss exorcism, how it happens, and all the ramifications of it. I think the thing that really got me interested was the discussion of the scientific analysis of the dilation of the pupils. You know, it's one of the things that we tell people to watch for when we train them to do an exorcism, and we've trained thousands of people worldwide. Very often the pupil changes color, but it always dilates. It's a very clear indication of the presence of an evil spirit. And in the movie, they get that down to an exact science, and there's a great scene in which they got the camera on this woman's eyes as the pupils are dilated. That's not Hollywood. That's real. There's always a danger of demonic transference. I was actually quite surprised that the subject was brought up in this film, because it's something you have to deal with. When you are concluding an exorcism, you're at the point of expulsion of the evil spirit. It often begins to bargain. I've even had them ask, can I come into you? Which is pretty absurd. But they will say, well, can I go into that person over there? Or can I go somewhere else? And of course, what we learn is that in advance, in most cases, we have to tell the evil spirit, now, you will only go where we tell you to go under the circumstances that we tell you to leave. Because sometimes they try to jump out early, so to speak, and get into somebody else. And if there's a willing recipient somewhere nearby, it can be a very dangerous thing. When you speak of the viewpoint that the church has in exorcism, you have to distinguish between the Roman Catholic Church and Protestant churches, or those of non-liturgical persuasions. Now, the Roman Catholic Church has an official position that basically says it's rare, not at all common, seldom seen. I disagree strongly with that. From my perspective, as a non-Catholic Protestant exorcist, it's quite common. It happens all the time. With me, virtually 7 days a week, I am doing exorcisms and cannot meet the need. Now, I think the church may say that simply because it's not adequately equipped to meet the need and knows that, or it may genuinely believe that. I can tell you that priests in the Catholic Church that I have talked with know that it's not rare and it's not common. But at least they acknowledge the existence of it, and the Pope himself has said there needs to be an exorcist in every diocese. One of the things I like about the film The Devil Inside is it juxtaposes this never-ending argument of, is it supernatural or is it psychological? And they get into that. And that's the reality of what you deal with in every single exorcism. The truth is, it's not hard to tell the difference. Now, when we train people to be exorcists, we teach them about dissociative identity disorder, borderline, psychosis, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and a number of mental health issues so that they know the symptoms to look for. And going into an exorcism, normally we profile the person very carefully. So, for example, if somebody says, I'm certified schizophrenic, here are the medications that I'm on, I'm under the treatment of a therapist, then they don't need an exorcism. They obviously have a mental health issue. But sometimes going into it, we just don't know. They haven't seen a therapist, but it's not hard to tell the difference. And the real key is this. Back to the movie, the eyes. And I tell people, once you've done an actual exorcism and you've looked into the heart of hell, you've stared into the face of real evil, there's something we call that look. You never forget it. Once you see the look, you never forget it. And when it speaks to you, then you know it's something the person couldn't have manufactured. And for example, sometimes it will speak a language that the host does not know. Now, how do you explain that? Very difficult to explain. There are several factors related to the interest in exorcism today. One is the times in which we live, the uncertainty. Crime, violence, drug usage, a culture out of control in many ways, violent, irrational acts being committed by people who otherwise seem to be somewhat normal. What's the explanation for people going postal, if you will? I think the other is the attempt of Western society to do what Eastern cultures haven't done. Allow rationalism and scientism to take over to the extent that we deny the realm of the metaphysical, of the otherworldly and the supernatural. And there's an innate hunger, I believe, that God's created within every person to have a spiritual dimension. And when we try to overlay that with whether it's materialism or scientism or our pursuit of hedonism, then we're denying people a basic human instinct. And they may not see it as that, but the cry for something which is paranormal, something out there beyond the natural senses, is part of every human being. And the whole exorcism thing taps into it. It says that there's something out there. It might be good. It might be evil. We need to know. The movie The Devil Inside talks about the stuff of demonic transference. This film suggests the possibility that none is safe when we all are at risk, and that is true. But I don't want people to unnecessarily fear that which is evil and supernatural. For those who have strong character, who have faith in God, and who live lives that are morally appropriate, they don't need to worry about a demon jumping upon them just because they walk down a dark hallway or they hear some spooky sound in the night. But the people who are at risk, that we find, particularly in Western culture, are people who have experienced traumatic things in their life and they've never processed it sufficiently through some kind of therapy or counseling, hold it inside, and the fear and the anger builds, providing an opening for demonic forces. So I would encourage not everyone to fear that a demon is going to get them because something scary happened, but I would also encourage those who have had severe trauma, and we find that particularly in the area of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, to get some help. Because if they don't get help, that could be an open door for the demon, or for the demon from somebody else to transfer to them. To find help for someone who has been traumatized and has a possible open door, or as we call it in exorcism, a legal right, just basic counseling, good therapy, go into a rabbi, pastor, priest, some spiritual authority figure that they can talk to who knows how to counsel people through the means of processing bad things which have happened in your life and get some perspective on it. Just sometimes a good close friend that you can talk to. But I find that the majority of possession victims have some terrible thing in their past and they've never told anybody. And it's very common. They come to me as an exorcist and they say, now I'm about to tell you something I've never told anyone in my life. And when they say that, I know there's a good chance of possession. The question of whether a person knows possession exists is a very good one. About half do and half don't. Half of them have an inkling something's going on. They have strange sensations, feelings. You know, they may try to go to church and, for example, see the Eucharist or communion and get sick when they do it. Or they see a cross or a religious object and they feel very uncomfortable around it. Some people tell me they go to church and they can't pray or maybe can't sing or can't even talk when they're in there. But there are other people who don't have a clue. But other people do, because they see them exhibiting strange irrational behavior from time to time. And maybe even see them make complete switches in their personality. And they see it, but the person themselves, they don't have the capacity to see it. Almost everybody on whom we do an exorcism needs another exorcism, and sometimes 3, 4, 5 or more, because there are lots of demons inside that you don't always get the first time. And you have to have successive exorcisms, just like with therapy. You don't go see a therapist and get everything worked through on the first visit. It takes a while for the emotions to get down to the deepest level at which you need the psychotherapy. Same thing with possession. So there are multiple demons in people, and you don't always get the worst ones the first time around.